We're going to do today is we are going to look a bit on how Datadog works, why we chose it. Let me just find the thing here. Cool. So we have an agenda like this. Why we chose Datadog. We're going to talk a bit about monitoring. I'm just going to talk a bit about APM, application performance management. We're going to talk a bit about monitors, logs, synthetics, and then we're going to talk about next steps in QA. So yeah, I think we can get going. Just ask questions on the way. If it's something very specific, I'll either park it for the end, or we can take it offline. Sometimes implementation details may get a bit cloudy on this format. So yeah, my name is Jan. For those of you, I think most of you know me, and we also have Philip here, who's from Datadog. So my job today is not to sell Datadog. I have no personal or financial interest in Datadog whatsoever. And even if I know the endowment effect, I can't really say other than I think it's a good tool, and I'm going to try to show you why I think that, and also going to talk a bit about why I don't think it solves all use cases, or why you need to use other tools. So first of all, why did we choose Datadog in the beginning? And way back in 2 years ago or something like that, we were in need of a tool for monitoring our infrastructure, and we looked in a bunch of different places and figured that Datadog was a really nice place to create dashboards, and it was really easy to integrate to all our tool stack. So we looked at that and decided that was something we're gonna use. And then we started procurement, which took around, I think, 12 months from we started looking at it till we actually had a license. So of course that also, yeah. Anyway, that in that time period though, Datadog came out with APM and logging. So that was actually quite nice, because that meant that we didn't have to go to other tools for those features. So we were looking at New Relic, for example, for APM, and Gray Logs and other for logging. But in the end, we were able to find one tool that covered all our areas. So that was quite good. And another question we get a lot is why don't you just host something yourself? Use Elk Stack or Grafana and Prometheus and all those things. And I think several people in the team had experience with running Elk, and they didn't feel like that was a very positive experience. So we wanted to go with something that was hosted and where we could use software as a service and outsource some of the pain of running these things. In hindsight, we should probably have used that as an intermediate thing, but that is something else. Cool. So upfront, are we happy with it? Do we think it covers what we need? And I think we are both happy and sometimes unhappy. For most cases, we actually find that it solves our use case, and it gives us the ability to monitor our infrastructure and capture logs and everything. But nothing just works out of the box, right? So I think we've had a few startup issues in configuring it and making sure that it could pick up logs from our clusters and all that stuff. And I think that is something, looking back, we should probably have allocated more time with, or taken it more serious that was a thing. That said, when you set it up, it is really easy, and there is a lot of cool features, and offering it as a service to our developers on our Kubernetes platform actually works, I think, quite nice, in the sense that they don't have to do anything. The teams can just plug and play, and then it works. So that's good. We are seeing some things though that, I know Ahmed have had, and Casper before, had some issues with missing data coming out of, like, if you send a lot of data, like 5,000-10,000 events within a couple of 100 milliseconds, you may see some issues there, and we have still some issues with short-lived jobs and stuff like that. But I think overall it is quite good. So that was why we chose it and everything. And then finally, I want to say like a few things about why I'm here. I'm not here because I'm part of the platform team and I'm offering this service and I think it's really good. I'm here because I think there's two important things that I believe in. One thing is incentives. So I really believe in the fact that if you build something, you should also be able to run it, and you should have the tooling to do so. And secondly, I really believe in a data-driven approach. So I think if you have the responsibility of running something, you should also be able to back that up with data. So I think those two cases is something you can cover with all the observability tools out there. But I think Datadog is a good tool for it, and we have it. And it's quite easy to get going. So I would say for those of you who haven't started, I think that's an easy place to start. Right? Any questions so far before we start showing some stuff? Nope. Good. So I'll do like this, and hopefully I should be able to show stuff for the stream as well. Those of you who are on the live stream, you can ask questions in the comment field if you need to. Cool. So I've created a bunch of links here, and I'm going to show a bit of live stuff and things like that. But let's just look at the Datadog, that one. So let's just look at some few high-level things, and I'm going to show a few examples of what we've done, what we think is nice, and then we can take it from there. So first of all, I know this is something that also all the Datadog demos start out with. So the host map, you can like it or not, but I think actually that it provides some insights into if you want to do some quick filtering. So you can do stuff like Kubernetes AKS, for example, that shows me all the clusters that are running Kubernetes, or the hosts that are running Kubernetes. And I can do stuff like environment or like this. That's up like that, or I can do cluster name, so like this, and I can easily filter on the Kubernetes clusters that are currently running. Even our test clusters you can see here, and you can get some easy insights into, for example, this is the number of or percentage of CPU. But you can easily change that to, for example, running containers or running pods in Kubernetes, and get some kind of number of, for example, here there is a few more running on the other nodes, and here there seems to be a stale node, and so on. You can actually also utilize this, which is something we've done quite a bit. If suddenly there's no containers running on a certain host, that's also usually a good indicator that something is quite off. But you can do by a lot of things here. You can also use some of the tracing, or as you can see here, custom metrics and all kinds of things. So it's the imagination that sets the boundary here. Other things I think is quite good from the kind of out of the box thing. You obviously have the infrastructure list where you can see everything that is living on your cluster, or under your subscription for Datadog. And here I can go and look at some particular host and get some metrics out of it. Again, this is not something I do on a daily basis or anything like that, but sometimes when we debug things, it is actually quite nice that you can go directly in and look at some of the core metrics. You can also look at other things, so you can, for example, see which logs are being produced out of that particular host, see all the tags that are associated with the given host, and so on. And this, for example, is a Linux server with probably 32 gigs of memory. Okay, so that's that thingy. Then on this thing as well, you have containers, which is quite nice. We've been using this a lot for Kubernetes, so I'm probably flavored a bit in that, and this is tainted a bit for that, so bear with me, but it should work for most other things as well in a similar way. So here we have a huge list of containers, and what is quite nice here is that apart from the fact that I can filter on, like I could filter for a particular container, for example, if I wanted to see all the Datadog agents here. I can see how much memory they're using and what the status are and what kind of CPU they're using. And I can go in like this, and then I can actually see which processes are running under the particular container. I find that's quite nice, because then you can dive really deep into what is going on. That goes on for also the actual VMs if you're monitoring VMs or things like that. But I think it's useful even for containers. And here you can even go in and look at stuff like this is a particular process, and then I can reverse search, so figure out this process, where is that otherwise running. So here you can see the different hosts that this is running on. So I think that's kind of a nice thing. And one thing to keep in mind here as well is you can actually do this on a historical level. So if you want to debug something that happened a week ago, you can actually compare which processes were running at which time. That is, I think, really powerful, because it adds a whole new dimension to how you log your things, or how you look at your things. So that's good. And here you can see a very nice indication of someone running asleep to avoid the long, short-lived container issue we were talking about earlier. So that's good. Yeah. There's also a cloud function thing here. I won't go into that. It's for running, I think, mainly AWS Lambda at this point, but at some point, I guess, I don't know. Is Azure supported here as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
The function from Azure is enabled.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's cool.
You can talk to Misha about that if you want to send it.
Okay, cool. That's very nice. All right. So that was the overall overview of the thing here, and then let me just show you a few examples of. Just keep this open.
Command click.
Command click. Thank you. A few dashboards that we've been using, and they're not at all pretty or perfect, but it's just to give an insight into how we're using it and hopefully give some inspiration to how things can be used. So this one, for example, is one we use for monitoring our Kubernetes clusters. We basically have some monitors here, or metrics stating how many nodes are we running per cluster. Do we have any alerts, and the health, and we also have a number of nodes over time, including the response time of the master server and the number of VMs, the alerts for particular VMs. And I mean, personally, I like to rely on alerts more than dashboards, but honestly, I think sometimes you get tired of alerts, or you haven't set up the correct alerts, and having this on the wall, seeing spikes here and there suddenly, or can actually be quite helpful. So we've had that on the wall here for a while. And you can see, okay, something weird is happening, I get a lot of alerts. Okay, it's probably because there's some nodes that are being rebooted or requires reboots. So that's one thing. Another thing is the same thing, but an old version, and I just wanted to show it to kind of show the features of maybe not do like that. So this is the same thing, but in a different way. So it shows node counts, it shows the number of containers per pod, number of pod per node, and different other metrics, CPU usage and things like that. I think this is something we found was very good for looking at from time to time, but it's not something you look at the wall. So, but it's just to show that you can do different things, like for example, having containers with out-of-memory potential. I think that's quite a strong indicator. Say, okay, maybe Microsoft should look at how they set up their OMS agents on the AKS clusters, because they're running quite high on memory. And other than that, maybe someone in pre-planning or a backend somewhere should be thinking about that as well. And alerts over time is also something you can see here. Okay, a few other examples. This one is very simple, but it's just to showcase that we actually use this for monitoring the modules we have our Kubernetes cluster. So we set up a custom metric that sends data whether the modules we have are up to date. So you can use this to track versions. We just use a 1-0 kind of approach. So if the clusters are out of sync, we have a red marker on the particular module. So that's something you can use as well. A bit more. Let's see this one, whether that's the one I want to show. Yeah, that's basically the same we had before. It looks a bit nicer, thanks to Nikos for printing it up. The one I actually wanted to show was this, which is a dashboard that is created to help folks set limits on their pods in Kubernetes. So you have the concept of configuring how much memory and CPU each particular pod or container sets in Kubernetes should have. And this can actually help you do that by showing you, this is for the Go API example, how much CPU usage is per pod, how much memory usage over time, and whether you find yourself within a certain band of things. So again, it's mostly your imagination that sets the limits for what you can do there. I want to show a few more things that we find quite useful, because a lot of these are, I mean, they're just dashboards showing things, and it's very good. But one thing we find to be quite nice as well is the fact that you can actually create notebooks, which is quite good for collaboration. So, for example, this notebook was something I used, or we used back in January, where we had a quite significant cluster issue where we were seeing a lot of out of memory problems. We were thinking, at least. We didn't actually know what it was, but the Kubernetes nodes kept dying continuously, and that was a big problem. And one thing you can do then is that we sat down and figured out, let's think of every possible metric that could have some kind of impact on this problem. And then we just started from the top, creating all kinds of things, and you can time it, and you can see here I timed it on the some kind of I don't know, 45 minutes where the problem happened, and you can see here, okay, this was something that happened just before. Other things seem stable, and then there's a spike here, for example, and there's a spike here, and those kind of things. And like the data is not completely up to date because it's way back and things. But anyway, the point persists, that you can actually start looking at things like, for example, the CPU usage that is being picked up, and things like that, which is really powerful because it allows you to identify what could be causes of the issue. So in that sense, I think it underpins the value around being able to run your own things, because you can actually get insights into a lot of different metrics, and use that for your analysis. Cool. What else was there? Cluster usage. This is another example from the Aditya created, which is showcasing how much we use the different clusters and the nodes on the cluster. And I'm not sure exactly what it's telling, but at least it shows you that you can do cool stuff with graphs, right? Important stuff. Okay, that was a lot of Kubernetes. And I hope you can realize that things goes across to other tools as well. And one other thing I wanted to show you is just out of the box with Azure, we actually get a ton of metrics already. So if you're running anything on Azure or Google or AWS or whatever, you actually don't have to set up things and create a lot of metrics for things. This is the list of things that are supported with Azure Monitor, and all of those are out of the box supported with Azure as well, or sorry, Datadog as well. So if you're running a Postgres database, you can get these metrics for your database out of the box. You don't get everything, and if you have database logs, you need to set up some custom things to do the transfer of logs, that sort of thing. But at least you get the basics, and I think that's actually quite nice.
Question.
Yes.
The previous company I worked in, they were using Azure 100%. Now
Yes.
they moved to AWS. But when they were using Azure, they found out that very often the Microsoft's own reporting of down was not showing any downtime at all if it was less than a minute
Yes.
for all the resources, so they had to put up their own mechanisms to continuously pull and monitor. What about this? Is this just relying on whatever Azure's reporting?
Yes. So all of these integration metrics are based on Azure's monitoring. So that's the same as you would see in the Azure portal or Log Analytics or wherever you're looking at that.
But you know what I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking about. And this is why also coming back to having more than one tool or having different tools may be good, because this particular case, I think it would be good to have counters. And you can see in some of these, for example, this one, we have these three, for example, would be, this is an old dashboard, but maybe this one. These should actually be numbers of the same thing, right? Like you have the kubelet health, you have the node health, you have the number of Datadog agents and other proxy metrics that should indicate what is the right number, because you cannot always rely on a single number to be correct. So double up.
Also for prod, we don't have access to Azure's dashboards, right?
Perhaps not.
Yeah, so not, like for developers, it's the only way to see prod metrics on Azure for Postgres, for example, would be Datadog, because we don't have access to the portal for prod.
Yeah, true. So this is something at least to consider. And integrations wise, I mean, I'm not going to go into details on everything because there is a ton of them, but you can see that there is quite a few, and you can go into those or ask questions or whatever for the particular ones. Not all of them are like super useful, but a lot of them are quite nice. Cool. The last thing I wanted to show you is a thing you can do when you get over the hump. So when you use it in the way we do it in a Kubernetes cluster, where we have set up some underlying infrastructure, the Datadog agents and everything, you can do things like this, where you in your application, you specify a few annotations, and then your Prometheus metrics is picked up, for example. So if you run a Prometheus server along with your application, or install a tool that has Prometheus, which is another metric server, then it actually comes out of the box. And I think that is quite nice, and we have used that a lot. I know FPO is also using it quite a lot because they expose Prometheus metrics on all their jobs, and they get all these into Datadog automatically. So that's some of the things I think really really makes it easy and good to use. I have a few more things I want to show, but you're probably but I want to show that just after Ahmed shows a bit on how you can do things inside the application. This was a lot of infrastructure, so I'll give this over to him.
Cool. So my name is Ahmed. I'm a software engineer on the Odin team, and we started using Datadog I think about a month ago or a couple of months ago. We started by using the metrics first, so no APM, nothing. We just sent pure metrics, and then we decided to like see what the APM can offer us. So that was, I think, a nice experience. So what I'm gonna show you now is some of our services running APM. First, maybe show you the service map, because it's kind of nice to see what services are connected to each other. So you can see here, for example, that we have a service called Odin Vessels that is connected to its database, and also Odin users, and same with services. So you can see kind of if services are talking to each other, you will see them on this graph, and you'll see arrows going out from services to other services. So, and then what we can show is also a list of services. Yeah, and these are some of our services. But first, like, the idea of tracing is basically to have an insight into what the application is doing. So basically see the requests as they come in and how long time they take in each specific module, and then when they're done. So an example of that would be, no, this is not. Maybe let's take another one. Yeah. So this is, for example, one service. These are the endpoints, and this is all like done basically by just adding a couple of lines of code into our application and replacing a couple of libraries. So we did not have to write code to get this dashboard. It's all basically auto-generated. You can see here the total number of requests per unit time. Here's the latency graph with the different P's, percentiles. You can see that there's no errors during these 60 minutes. I think if I do the past day, you can see a couple maybe. No, not even there. Past week. Yeah, you can see 4 errors. Okay, yeah, during a specific point in time. So you can see the total number of requests, about 2,000 requests in a 2-hour span, and the latency, of course, as it's there. Latency distribution with different percentiles as well. Unfortunately, like, one of the things that is slightly annoying here is that we could not filter by endpoint. So we have this heartbeat, which takes basically 10 microseconds or something really low, because it's a heartbeat. We don't do anything in it. We don't even check the database connection. So it kind of skews the the latency distribution. But I mean, it is what it is. We can also dive into specific requests. So let's say we go to this request. If you want to see what happens, we can see the latency breakdown, what time is spent where, and you can see that, yeah, it's basically a GET request, so most of the time is spent in the handler, and only this short amount of time is spent in the Postgres, although this looks weird. But anyways, maybe let's not do 1 week, but let's take the past hour. Yeah, and put, yeah, and this looks more consistent, I think. So yeah, you can see here that this is the request, so this is a span basically. This is where the request comes in, and then each time you go into a function, for example, we go here into the handler, a new span is started, and this is another span, and this is basically at the end of the span is where the Postgres query happens. And of course, if there was like cache levels or different interactions with Elasticsearch or whatever, you will also see different spans for each. So you can see what is the most time spent where. Yeah, so you can see here that most of the time is spent in the Postgres land. Here's one query, here's another query, and the final query is the commit. And you can dig into why certain queries are low, for example. Or you can maybe you want to see how it looks when there is errors. Unfortunately, right now we don't have any errors. So I guess that's good. But maybe like if there's requests with higher latency, you can also like select here the long tail and start digging into why these requests are taking longer time. You can see that we don't, for now, for this service at least, it's kind of consistent in a kind of a 200 millisecond range at most. So there's nothing really to show here, but that's what you would do if you have slow requests or slow requests basically. So that's one thing you can do here. I think there's another thing that I can show as well. So
Could I just have one question? The Go code? that's running underneath? Is that, did you have to, how do you instrument it, or does it automatically pick up the debug symbols and do this breakdown of?
So part of it is automatically instrumented, like the endpoints, detecting the endpoints that you have in the API, that's automatically instrumented. Detecting the Postgres queries, that's almost automatically. We just needed to replace the database SQL with another that is provided by Datadog. So you replace a library with an exact clone that has instrumentation that is usually provided by Datadog. And you can see like Datadog APM. You can see there's a lot of integrations for different languages as well. It's not only Go. They have different SDKs. I think it will be hard to find on the spot now. But yeah, there's tons of documentation on this for the different languages as well, if you're not using Go, if you're using something else. And I mean, the view looks different from one language to another. So for example, for Rails, or for another language that does MVC, you would see the models, the views, the controllers, and the time spent in each component or each module. But for now, at least for this, we have a really flat structure. So it's only the handler and then the store function and then the query. So yeah. If you have more deeper levels, you will also see them in the spans represented. Yeah, one thing I wanted to show, what is it? So for example, if you want to investigate why this is happening, you can view related logs. So that will basically go to another view where the logs happen. And you can see if you have the right tags, that's also important. You can see why this is happening. So right now, I think we have the logs are not very clear. We are only doing access logs at the moment, so it's not very useful. But if you have the right logs set up, or if you have the right, everything correctly set up, you can easily know or dig deeper into why these 500s happen, for example. Yeah, so that's nice. One other thing that you can do is not necessarily. So I looked at the service from the web requests happening. You can also look at the DB services, not necessarily your service, but just the DB part of it. So let's go to weird. Yeah, here it is. So this is the same service, Odin Vessels, but all the queries that Odin Vessels make. And you can see that, let's say, how long each query usually takes, the total time spent. And this is all auto-generated also, because it kind of knows that this query ran and then makes this view automatically. Everything also with the percentile. So if you click here, you can see which requests generated this query. You can see the query itself, even though it's not really interesting. And I think something like, yeah, let me try to, no, just a second. Yeah, I think the variables inside the query are omitted. You don't usually see them by default, right? Yeah, you don't see the values that you insert, so there's no privacy concern, because I was also worried that the values inside the query will be exposed, and so, but it's not, I think. If you use the right $sign in Postgres or question mark in MySQL, they're kept intact. They're not exposed. Yeah, so that's basically it. I think this is our use case is still very basic. We're not fully utilizing it. I know that you can, from traces, you can access the logs, or for example, if you can spot a trace that is a 500, you can, from that trace, using the trace ID, go to the logs for this request. We don't have that set up at the moment. We're still not doing proper logging. I think we're lacking that a bit in our product, but it is basically also with the right setup, I think you can do a lot of investigation using these dashboards. One last thing, I know you're gonna dig into monitoring.
Sure, please show.
Yeah, so one thing I really like about this is, let's just go to one service. The suggested monitors, which is basically just gives you the alerts you need for free without needing for you to write stuff down. Let's just go to this again. So on the top bar, you can see this add monitors to this service you suggested. And you will see like some suggested monitors for this specific environment. Of course, you can switch the environment from top here. And that will change the monitors. But it's basically just a list of suggested monitors that really like one click away from adding it, and it's super helpful in my opinion. Something like when you have high error rate on this environment, please report it to me, and then you can get notified on Slack if the error rate is high or if the throughput changes significantly. If you're expecting like 10 requests per second, then all of a sudden you get 1,000. It's usually interesting to dig into why that happened. So these like I can just go through them and enable them, and it's that easy. That's quite nice in my opinion. So yeah, that's about it for me.
So the monitors is something that I find is really useful. I mean, it's something that it's really I think it's the cornerstone of being able to actually run your service, since you don't want to look at dashboards all day long, right? So there is a ton of monitors already. I'm just going to show you what it takes to create a new one, because I find that it's actually, as you say, quite nice, even if you don't get the suggested one. So you can do all kinds of things based on logs or events or processes or whatever. Also, some of the integrations have implicit metrics and monitors, like the Kubernetes integration is automatically alerting on whether the Kubernetes cluster is healthy. But you can do simple stuff like figuring out a metric, right? So if you want to do like CPU usage or something, right? You can just find the, for example, the Docker CPU usage, and it shows you what it is, and then you can find for whatever, right? So you could do a specific cluster and do whatever you want, make a group by of container. So this is the excluding, sorry, average by container name, for example. And then you would get a different metric for each container, and then you can specify thresholds. You can put in some template replaceable text, and really do easy things like making sure that you notify either like persons, so you can notify myself, or you can say I want to know for Slack. Oh, sorry. So I can set up a channel, so I can set up our Slack channel, and even with we have PagerDuty as well for on-call, and you can set up that as well, so you can get towards a specific PagerDuty service. You can set up an alert to that as well, and I think it's really easy, and it is quite nice, I think. You can also do all kinds of things, like whether you want to have missing data alerts and change alerts, anomaly detection, outlier, all kinds of fancy stuff that I'm not going to go into, but that is really nice. And one thing I want to add on top of that is so monitors down here. We actually went a bit further, and thanks to Jim, we went into to actually starting creating some of this as code. So, for example, for our Kubernetes clusters, we got really tired of having 13, 15 alerts per new cluster. So what we've actually done is that we've specified we then, every time we create a new cluster, we can just specify this is a new cluster, this has this cluster name, and then go. So this is actually, I think, quite nice, and this showcases in the that's not what I wanted. This one, monitors. I can see here that a ton of these are created by Terraform, like this, right? So we have all of these which are consistent across the clusters. All right, and even if you want to do custom stuff on, so you talked a bit about metrics. So I just wanted to showcase a few things, like things we've done with metrics as well, which is to have alerts on, for example, the API server metrics time. This is a very simple health check. You simply send a metric, right? You include the package. This is a Python. Include the package from Datadog, and you send a metric like this. It's super easy, and the same goes even for shell scripting. So, for example, we have a stress tester for different purposes, and there we can just add a simple curl to send the metrics. I think that's really powerful. Cool. The last couple of things I want to show is the logs. You mentioned that a bit already. I think this is actually, it's some of the features that I think is a bit underused, but it is, I think, really, really nice. I'm going to show you a bit of example of showing access logs from Kubernetes cluster with our Nginx ingress. So I get auto completion here, right? Kubernetes namespace, and I can look at Nginx. And I want to look at this one. So here I can see all the access logs from different Nginx clusters, or from different Nginx, and I can even specify that I don't care about. I only care about production, obviously. So I can do stuff like that, and I can quickly go deeper and say, okay, let's assume that I'm Captain Peters, and I want to look at remote container. Then I can search like this. Ooh. Remote. Sorry, I missed a remote wildcard. That. No, god damn it. Maybe I need to expand the time frame. Yes, there we go. I was always scared there for a second. Okay, so here I can see all the requests that goes towards remote container management. It's quite easy. And I can easily do things like if I want to say, for example, I want the browser. I can click this and I can search for this. And that adds so I only get the request from Chrome browser, or I can even do quickly do like this, and I get all the ones that are not Chrome browser. So I think that's something is quite nice, and you can say I only want the error messages. Luckily there were none. It's good for them. Maybe if I remove Chrome, no. Maybe the past week. A few. Okay, good. So I can see some errors. One thing I can also do is, so this gives me an easy insight to that. What I think is also quite nice is actually that not only can you look at your logs and for debugging, but you can actually do analytics as well. So you can come in here and say, okay, I want to show or look at logs over, for example, let's do this one. Again, Nginx, direct, and prod. And let's do a bit more time, past hour. And I can do the same thing. Let's do remote container. And then I can group by status, for example. And then I can see the status code for, let's say, the past week. And roll it up however I like, every 30 minutes. And I can see how many requests I get on different status codes. And again, I can add this to monitors and dashboards as well, just by export to a dashboard or export to a monitor. I think this is actually, again, I think it's quite nice. It gives you an easy insight into things. So that's, and then the other thing which is kind of cool with this thing is also the live tail. So here I can actually see out of the box the live tail, all the logs coming in. This is being sampled obviously because there is not a lot of filtering, but if I then again look at the namespace, oh nice, that doesn't work, cool.
Okay, if you can use tags here. Can you even use tags here? I don't know about that.
I don't know if you know. Ah, that's probably why then. Yes, there we go. So now I can see the logs pouring in here, and I'm still being sampled, but if I close it down even further, I can start seeing the actual live logs, and I can see, and my experience is that it's quite fast. I mean, we're talking about a few seconds max, so that's really nice. I think it helps debugging a lot. Cool. The last thing I want to show you, see if I promised correctly. Yes, the last thing I want to show you is something I think is a new feature, and we don't use it a lot in the teams, but it's really, really nice and really cool, and it's something that I think you can attest to, Philip. It's something that is being invested a lot into, because it's New Relic is really good at this, so I'm assuming that Datadog really want to push this feature. So synthetics checks whether your stuff is online from outside your cluster, outside your environment. Really nice. I'm going to show you a use case for an error we had a month ago. So it's difficult to see here, but we actually see a bit of a little bit more than error rates here. So if I zoom in on this, I can see that there are some errors here, and actually I don't know why that's not filtering, but I think maybe we can do this. Let me go back for a second and filter a bit broader. So I think if we look at this thing here and look at OE, I think we can see something where we can see okay, this is not the one I wanted, but anyway, this gives a complete example as well. You can see here actually a breakdown of the request, so the response time, how much was spent on DNS connection, SSL, and all that stuff, and you can then see that there was a 500 that should be 302.
I have a question.
Hmm?
What about the services that are behind the assign page? Like ours, for example, when you go into Odin, you get redirected to a sign-in page.
Yeah.
So you
So
can't really test if the page is working. You can only test if the sign-in page is working.
yes, you can do things like inject cookies, and I think there's also being work done to make it easier to authenticate, if I remember.
Yes, and it's actually a departure to real user monitoring. This is being announced in July.
But you can at least inject an authorization header and even a cookie, so you can do things. I know they're short-lived and require some automation, but you can do things. I think OE, for example, have a health check that is running on basic auth to make sure that that works. But obviously, this works better out of the box for public pages, definitely. But I think in general it's really nice, and I think you can also look at the things where I think this one will show that, for example, I mean, for some reason they put Tokyo in as well, and I think here you will see, oh, actually this is not, what is this? Oh, this is actually the one I wanted to show you for before, sorry. So we had a SSL certificate problem, and you can actually see here that that this was caught by the synthetics check. So even if it wasn't actually caught by our own logging, it was caught by the synthetics check for Captain Peter. And you can see other things like if you have slow load times and such. So yeah, cool. That was the quick go through, I think, on everything. So should you start using Datadog? Well, I think if you have something already that really works, I don't have any preference to move you guys over, or I think you should just stay wherever you are. If you have something that's slightly working, or you want to add another level on things, I think it's definitely worth looking into this. it's super easy to hook up initially, and you can get a lot of value almost out of the box. So I think that's really good. I don't particularly care about one tool across Maersk or anything like that. All I care about is that people are able to actually monitor their stuff and put up alerts and see their logs and such. And I think this is a good tool for that. So if you have any particular questions, please ask, or there's some folks here also if you have implementation questions that you can ask. Yeah, I think that's it. Any questions right now?
Just does it have a CLI kind of thing for people used to Linux?
So
you go point and click, but you could write grep.
There's no direct CLI. There's an API which you can use, but there's no. I think there's some third-party ones here and there. But there's no particular. It is a UI-driven tool in that sense, and you need to click a lot. You can do stuff like the Terraform for infrastructure as code. There's other providers or other third-party tools that help you, but and you can export dashboards to YAML format and stuff like that.
There is a tool called Dog Shell. It's actually on Datadog documentation. Seems like a greppy thing.
Okay.
Oh, nice. There you go.
Cool.
Works for metrics as well. Seems nice.
Just when you have 10 shells open anyway, then one more. Right?
I think a lot of times you would find that the native tooling may be quicker, like using kubectl logs or whatever. But the problem is when your pod dies, or you need to look at what happened yesterday or the day before, it's actually really nice to be able to search across something that disappeared, or a VM is crashed and gone. It's nice to be able to pick up what was the problem at that point.
I think that could be super nice for this. I don't know if it's already existing, but when you're sitting looking at your code in VS Code, for example, I don't know if there's a plugin, but it would be nice if like some area of your code was a bit shady through some warnings, errors, and you could see that directly in your source code. So, highlighted, hey, here's something you may want to look at, instead of jumping around.
That sounds more like static code analysis though than.
But here you could see it from pure live data hooked back into your code. No? Maybe not.
Maybe not. I don't know. You can see your traces, right? But and you can see your logs, but I don't. You cannot hook up like into your code base. I mean, it needs to run somewhere, right?
VS Code.
You can build it, make money. Yeah. Anything else? So you can run a VM agent, and I would assume that that can do something, but I'm not particularly sure about the integrations directly with it. I know also that you can take logs from an event hub, or from the standard Azure tooling can put to an event hub, and then you can have an Azure function or similar to push the data from that event hub into Datadog. So you can do stuff like that, but I'm not particularly sure about the native tooling.
In my previous company, we had a setup with containers and another setup with VMs for some other stuff, and we just needed to install the agents on the VMs.
Yeah.
So it's similar to what we have in the cluster, but just like agents on VMs instead of sidecars.
Yeah.
So it is possible to do that. Yeah.
And there's code libraries, tracing libraries for C# as well. So you can implement your tracing there.
And if you're wondering, like, if you don't want to be vendor locked into Datadog, if you're thinking I'm gonna implement tracing maybe somewhere else in a year from now, when it's mature or whatever, you can just use open tracing, which is like vendor neutral, not related to Datadog. You can implement the tracing there, and Datadog will pick it up. And if you won't decide to switch vendor for whatever reason, you can do that easily. Like you don't need to vendor lock yourself into Datadog.
It's a good point. It goes the same for logging. Like
Yeah.
we suggest standard out logging,
That's
and Datadog picks that up. That would be the general approach. So you don't you don't lock yourself into having to log to a particular library with a particular setting. You can just use your normal log setting. And if you pass it as JSON, it automatically puts out the attributes. So that is quite neat, I think. If it's not broken, at least.
If I may add, we don't have professional services in Datadog, but we have a lot of resources dedicated to coming out, enabling you to be an expert on the platform. So again, I mean, if it's bi-weekly, we'll be happy to come.
Yeah.
If we ever said no to coming to me.
No.
Please do, we'll just ramp up with more people in the piece.
So no mask will not come.
Say it again?
Yeah, you will not say no mask will not
No,
come.
no, exactly. No, but I mean, it's we can sit down and it doesn't have to be, you know, presentation screens. It could be setting up your trial account if you want to see something, test out something, run it for a few weeks, put it down again, or reuse it, or enable it. We're happy to come out and help you with a specific thing, in case that's. Yeah, you guys have my number. You can also have my number.
Cool. Thanks. Hope it was a little bit useful. All right. Thanks.